Hello, Merry Christmas. So as you can probably tell, this is not going to be a vlog style video. There's no footage of me making coffee or matcha, or there's no climbing in this video. I really just wanted to sit down and talk about my favorite books of 2025. If you watched my previous video, my Vlogtober video, I made a passing comment there that I would film this video and I would create and write. But that was 2 months ago, and because November was busy and December was like 10 times busier, I never really had time to gather my thoughts about my favorite books of 2025. And the Christmas season has really drained my time and my emotional stamina that I've been putting off doing this for so long. But today, I finally got around to push myself to film this, so there. Just for context, I am really bad at keeping track of books that I've read. I tried to remedy that at the beginning of this year. I downloaded the Fable app, where I could keep track of all of the books that I read. And then I did that very religiously for about 2 or 3 months before I fizzled out. According to my count, according to the last book that I logged on my Fable app, from January to February, I only used it for 2 months. I read a total of 18 books. And then, because I read almost exclusively on my Kindle, for the rest of the year, I read a total of 48 books. So not bad. I'm really proud of that number. Out of the 48 books that I've read this year, I'm gonna talk about my 5 favorite books. The way that this video is going to be structured is I'm going to talk about number 5 to number 2 in no particular ranking. So number 5 to number 2, these books I equally love, and they're all equally my favorites. And then number 1 will be sort of my best, most favorite book. Just another caveat, a lot of these books were not written or released in 2025. Again, these were just my favorite books that I read this year. So there, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with number 5, this one is kind of a cheat because this is a trilogy of books instead of just one book, but I had to package them all together. I'm sorry if that rubs you the wrong way. So number 5 is the Scholomance trilogy by Naomi Novik. I've read Uprooted and Spinning Silver. I read Uprooted when I was in like 2018, 2017, and I really loved the world building that she does there. It's very accessible fantasy. So I read this trilogy in 3 days, 1 book a day, while I had work and while I had like real life responsibilities. That's just how much I could not put these books down. I really love this dark academia thing that Naomi Novik was trying to write. One of the things that I really like about this trilogy is that all of the characters have attitude. And all of the characters are especially our protagonist, Galadriel. She is so full of angst. She's a take no BS kind of person. And a lot of the other characters in the story are equally like that. Another thing that I really liked about this trilogy, about the story, is the school itself. The Scholomance, the school that these students go to learn their magic, it's another character in the story itself. It lives and it breathes and it changes, and it serves to anchor the greater plot in this whole trilogy. And a lot of the events are centered around the school itself. Another thing that I really liked about this was the magic system. The magic system is very unique. Magic is created through human effort, and it becomes a currency. Mana becomes a currency with which students can trade mana with each other so that they can use magic. There's also this like commentary on classism, wherein if you come from a house or an enclave, as they call it, that's rich and that has a lot of funding and a lot of resources, and you are a student who goes to the Scholomance, like you have a leg up above all of the other students because your mana is supplied by the enclave. And for example, our protagonist, Galadriel, she does not come from an enclave, and so she has to sort of work extra hard for her own mana. One of the things I did not like about this book was sort of the last book, titled The Golden Enclaves. I think, for me, the ending of the trilogy sort of felt a bit rushed to me. And there were too many characters that needed to have their plots closed, that I think the main plot and the main tandem in this story sort of got lost in the sauce for a bit. But despite that, I really, really loved this book. It's very great to see a fantasy academia book with this much world building and this much character-centered narration. Number 4 is a book that I had a very hard time reading because it was so heavy, but I will talk about it anyway because these things need to be talked about. Number 4 is Consent by Gilles Ciment. This was released in 2024. This book is sort of a memoir by the author about her relationship with her late husband. The way that the story goes is that she fell in love with him when she was 17 and he was in his 40s, and he was married with kids. This is a follow-up book to her first memoir called Half a Life, which she wrote in 1996. The context of this book, Consent, was Jill wanted to wrote this book during the peak of the Me Too movement. And because of the Me Too movement and all of these women who were finding the courage and speaking out against all of the disgusting men around them and all of the things that they've had to endure because of the men in their lives, Jill sort of looked into her own life and reflected on her relationship with her late husband. If I'm not mistaken, her husband died in 2017 when he was around 94 years old and she was in her 60s already. And this book is sort of just examining whether or not their relationship had a sort of predatory nature to it. And it is very, very difficult to read. Miss Ciment does not come to any conclusions about predation. A lot of the content of this book is just her juxtaposing her first memoir with this current memoir and seeing whether she's changed her mind about some of the things that she wrote in 1996. Her husband left his other family and his ex-wife for her, and they were together until he died. This is one of those things where there is no sort of resolution or conclusion or whether what happened was bad or good. There's a great quote that I really, really like. How do I convey yearning for a kiss while at the same time acknowledge the predatory act of an older man kissing a teenager? Perhaps, had I been the type of writer who peeked at her characters through the keyhole, I would have seen a middle-aged man kissing an underage girl. I might have been repelled by what I saw and written a different scene. But I was inside the girl, yearning for the kiss. I had intended to write the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But I could not find it, or else I found it everywhere. It is uncomfortable to read at times, this book. But by the end of it, I was crying because you really do feel that she loved her husband. And the way that she writes about her husband, he really did love her. And they had a very genuine relationship. Again, because of like the dynamics of their age gap and the power imbalance. And there could have been a power imbalance there, especially when he was like a prominent artist and she, again, was a minor when they got together. In an interview with the Literary Hub website, The Limitations of Autobiography, Jill Ciment on continually revisiting the past. She has another quote which I really liked. And she says, "But there's a moment in my first book when I go and seduce Arnold." Arnold's her husband. "The question in this new book then essentially became, who kissed who first? In one memoir, I have me as the aggressor. Yet looking back at it, I realized that wasn't true. He's the person who grabbed me and kissed me. After I sleep with him, he doesn't call me for like a month. And I have a total breakdown as only a 17-year-old can. I'm crying and I'm driving by his house. About a month later, he sends a letter asking me if I'll ever return to class. So yeah, just if you have the time, read it. I think it's very, very much worth it. So, number 3, this is also kind of a heavy book, but not in the same way that Consent was. One of my favorite books that I read this year is Circle of Hope by Eliza Griswold. So, Eliza Griswold is a writer, journalist, and she spent a number of years being in community with this church called Circle of Hope. Circle of Hope is an evangelical church in the United States, and it was founded by Ron and Gwen White. The meat of this book sort of just chronicles the events of Circle of Hope Church and the uncomfortable things that the leadership of that church had to go through. But this was a church that really, really wanted to do good by its community, but ultimately ended up fizzling out and burning out. As someone who comes from an evangelical background, although I don't sort of label myself evangelical anymore these days, so I know what it's like, and all of the struggles that the pastors and the leadership and the community went through, I could really feel in my heart, because these are things that I saw and I struggled with as well when I was growing up in the church. The people in this church really, really wanted to reach out to the community, and they did. They did not want to be an insular church at all. They wanted to sort of open the walls of their church to their community, and they were very, very successful at that. But because of things like the COVID pandemic, killing of George Floyd, with the Black Lives Matter movement, very, very contentious presidential election, they started having really difficult and uncomfortable talks about supporting people of color in the community, supporting LGBTQ people in the community. They tried to do everything right. And for me, in reading this book, they really did. They didn't do anything wrong. There were no scandals. There were no, money laundering or sexual scandals. The church sort of split into its campuses into like 3 or 4 campuses, and the leadership of these churches started to sort of go against each other, and there was a lot of friction between them, especially the 2 male pastors, Johnny and Ben. Ben is the son of the founding members of the church. Johnny and Ben kept fighting, and the women pastors sort of wanted their voices to be heard, but just the men and their egos sort of just kept overshadowing them. There was a point in reading it where I really could feel the egos in the room, and I have been in those rooms. And it is not a comfortable thing to watch, honestly. They wanted to do things ideally, in an ideal way, in a good way, but their methodologies and their philosophies on how to do it sort of did not match with each other. Yeah, I don't think it's a story about a church that failed, this book. This is just one of those honest and raw depictions of how community is so hard to build in our world right now. In the ending chapter of the book, Eliza Griswold writes, "Churches are messy places where people seek many things. Among them, a common understanding of something larger than they are, of God. This can be a beautiful, courageous endeavor that, in its effort to do right, usually goes wrong. Maybe churches need to die to rid themselves of their old bodies, their advanced pathologies, to make themselves new again. To be free of the weight of a past none can carry. This cycle is, after all, the foundational principle of faith." The 4 pastors humbled one another, or perhaps harrowed is the better word, raking one another's souls like fields and freeing them to grow. It's uncomfortable to accept our flaws, let alone having them pointed out to us, hearing how we hurt one another and ourselves by clinging to received ideas. If you come from a background similar to mine, I think you would enjoy this book, especially if you come from the evangelical church and you see all of the stains that Christians have put on the name of God in recent years. So, number 2. This one is more lighthearted. This is Rebecca Yarros's The Last Letter. And one of my friends suggested that I read this book first, The Last Letter, before getting into The Fourth Wing. And I did, and I was very much blown away by how good Rebecca Yarros is when it comes to romance stories. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with romance novels. I do love reading romance novels. It's just that when I was an undergrad, many years ago, my entire undergraduate thesis was built on romance stories made by Filipino authors. And so I had to read a lot of romance stories for like a year and a half. And so I kind of fizzled out. I kind of burnt out with romance novels. But I've been reading sort of on and off for the past few years. And of course, like reading fan fiction every now and then. But this was my first romance novel, full like romance novel in a while. And I really loved it. Our protagonists, Beckett and Ella, are very, very cute together. Rebecca writes them in such a way that they have really, really great chemistry. The story is very simple and it's kind of cookie cutter. But again, it's just written really well. But it is definitely not a feel-good romance novel. There's a lot of things here that happens to our main characters that are very tragic, that are very depressing, that are very sad. For the first 3/4 of the book, all of these unfortunate events and tragedies don't really feel... They're not written in a forced way. Everything happens sort of organically. Even their love story happens organically and realistically. But the latter quarter of the book, something happens, and a lot of the sentiment of the reviews that I've read online are very like, okay, this is too much. And I agree, it was too much. I felt like the last quarter of the book did not need to be written, and we could have just ended when it ended. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. The ending is very subpar. I did not really like it, but I am putting it as one of my favorite books this year because I really did enjoy the love story between Beckett and Ella and the other relationships that they form with their community. So, there. All right, number 1. My favorite book that I read this year and that was also released this year and sparked a lot of controversy and a lot of debate online, especially among book nerds, is Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I don't know what to tell you. I really love this book. This book was made for people like me. I am a high school teacher. I am an educator. I am also an academic. And, you know, double that with the fact that I just really love Dante's Inferno as well. Dante's depiction of Satan with the 3 heads chewing on those people is still my favorite depiction of Satan in any media. My connection with this book is also very personal. The Guardian's review of Catabasis opens with, "The more academia has broken your heart, the more you'll love Catabasis." A lot of the criticism with Catabasis is that it's a book that's very academic. And yes, I also agree with that criticism. It is very academic, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Kuang wrote this book as a byproduct or in parallel when she was also writing her own PhD and when her husband was also writing his PhD. I think Kuang really nails the hell that academics go through to get their master's degrees, to get published, to get their PhDs. I know what it's like to bang your head against the wall to try and write a thesis or a paper. I know what it's like to spend days or weeks scouring sources and references just to get one paragraph right. I know what it's like to write pages upon pages of what I thought was good writing, giving it to my advisor and her telling me, nope, we don't need any of this. And one of the things I think Kuang really gets of being in the academia is I really love the way that she depicts the loneliness of academia. I was very privileged and lucky to get my master's degree with the full support of people that I love. One of my closest friends also has the same master's degree that I do. And even with her help, and even with the outside perspective of someone like my wife, who by the time I presented and defended my thesis, knew my work inside out. She knew my work inside out. Even with those, even with the help of people who were much smarter than I am, I still felt like it was me against the world when it came to writing my thesis. So another thing that I really liked, just the absurdity of using magic chalk and playing with paradoxes to get magic. It's just, I don't know. Some people hate it. I agree. I get why. But for me, it's just like, great. I buy into this, honestly. Even though this is my favorite book that I read this year, there were some points that I did not like. There were some aspects of the book that I did not like. The Circles of Hell were very mild. The first few circles were kind of like, wow, this is great. This is a very new way of presenting the circles of hell. And then when it got to the latter circles of hell, I think there was no focus on those anymore. And yeah, I wish R.F. Kuang would have just fleshed out all of the circles. You know, and coming from reading Babel and Poppy Seed Trilogy, I honestly, it hurts me to say, but world building is not really R.F. Kuang's best strength. Yeah, but so it needs more work on that, honestly. Our protagonists, Alice and Peter, they don't really have a lot of chemistry, honestly. I felt like their love story could have just been a platonic colleagues / close friendship kind of dynamic. Alice had very questionable decisions in this book. And I get that, she was very, very desperate for the approval of her professor. But yeah, there were a lot of points in this book where Alice decides something and I'm just like, you idiot, why are you doing this? Right? To the detriment of the people around her, honestly. Despite all of that, again, my favorite book of this year. So that was my top 5 favorite books that I read in 2025. I hope you guys liked it and enjoyed it. If you have any hot takes or disagreeing opinions on my opinions, feel free to leave them in the comments. But please, don't be a jerk about it, honestly. Just, I'm willing to engage in conversation, just not with people who are mean. But yeah, again, thank you for sticking around. Hopefully more vlogs in 2026. I hope. Bye!